Hi folks, my name's Jay and I want to just talk to you about the history of Oxford philosophy and what we can learn from that for today. The history of Oxford philosophy specifically from 1900 to 1970s. Oxford philosophy prior to the Second World War was a time of traditional philosophy where um, the main philosophers were just interested in regurgitating whatever philosopher they had specialised in, whether it be Aristotle or Plato or whatever. So it was more a traditional affair. But during the 1920s and 30s, in Cambridge there was a hotbed of philosophical development with Wittgenstein and Bertrand Russell, where there was an emphasis on linguistic philosophy. But Oxford had been protected by the traditionalist philosophers and were not allowed to, or didn't know much, or didn't know anything really, about what was happening in Cambridge. Things began to change that near the end of the 1930s. There was beginning to be development and discussion in new ways of thinking. It began with Ayer, who I'll just get you the philosopher. It began really, Oxford philosophy began in a new way by this philosopher, A.J. Ayer. And basically in the 1930s he went to do his studies at the behest of some of the scholars in Oxford. He went to study, he wanted to go to Cambridge and he wanted to study under Wittgenstein and learn from him. But one of his professors said, no, I'd rather you go to the Vienna Circle. And the Vienna Circle in Austria, there were a number of scholars who were philosophers and scientists who were working together to develop philosophy in a much more rigorous way. And so Ayer went there, came back, and he brought this knowledge with him and then began to meet with people in Oxford in dorms, and there was discussions with people with up-and-coming philosophical stars such as Isaiah Berlin, etc., where these young postgraduates were discussing these new philosophical ideas. After the Second World War, just to note that even though these newer philosophers, influenced by A.J. Ayer and others, and Isaiah Berlin and others who were discussing new ideas, because of the influence of this new analytical type philosophy, there was not an appetite, and also there wasn't an appetite anyway because of the empiricist tradition on philosophy. There was not much of an appetite to bring in philosophy and integrate it with political philosophy. There was a big stigma with that, especially because of the Hegelian philosophers. The Hegelians had become into disrepute because they wanted great worldview ideas, and they became fuzzy in their conceptions, and so there was a general perception that philosophers in Oxford didn't want to get involved in these grand meta-narratives of worldview. They wanted just to stick to empiricism, critiquing, looking at things from an empiricist point of view, or the new philosophers of Ayer's type that wanted to look at linguistic philosophy. But yet, even though there was a stigma attached to the worldview Hegelian types, these philosophers still got engaged, even though they didn't give grand narratives in philosophy. They did get engaged in political activism against fascism, etc. Anyhow, at the Second World War, there was the traditional philosophers at Oxford passed away, and Ayer was appointed as a lecturer there, and he wrote a book about truth and logic and language, which was really important. And basically he made a demarcation between the between language that was empirical and language that was nonsensical. There was three types, but those the two I can just remember. And this book was quite influential in its time. And from there, Ayer stayed just a couple of years. Then he left. There was another philosopher there who I can't remember, who was heavily influenced by Wittgenstein and attacked mercilessly Ayer, as Ayer was working at another place for 10 or 12 years. Then in the 60s, Ayer came back, and Ayer to Oxford, where he encouraged, there'd already been an encouragement to do a deeper degree in philosophy. There'd been encouragements to more postgraduate studies. It became a world-renowned philosophical department, and so that's just a little bit of the history of Oxford philosophy from 1900 to around about 1970. What is my conclusion from this history? I think that the emphasis on the analysis of language in the end didn't actually fully deal with the big philosophical issues. The big philosophical issues were pushed under the carpet because there was a putting your nose up at any metaphysical concepts, because they couldn't be empirically verified, and so they were looked down upon. So they was just spending time analysing language. But Ayer realised in the 60s that this was just not getting anywhere, that issues on free will and things like that, they were just not dealing with the big issues. So I would say that one of the big problems was getting bogged down in semantics and language and not actually dealing with the big issues. It's good to define your language, but you also got to deal with the big issues. Also, the meta-narrative imperialism, in the sense that there's been a strong strain against metaphysical reflection, and I think that's healthily changed now. But at the time there was a lot of snubbing at the nose of reflecting on religious philosophy, for example. So I hope that's been of interest to you, and thank you for listening, and take care.